Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin, once again, in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 26. Now Joab fought against Rabbah of the people of Ammon and took the royal city. So, following the whole issue with the adultery with Bathsheba, the death of Uriah, which actually happened in this situation where Joab is fighting against the Ammonites, that this is the same exact war. This is the same siege. I mean, sieges could last years. So this is the same conflict. But following that, and now we've already seen that the child of that affair has already been born, has already lived a certain amount of time, and then fallen ill and died. So this is at least a year after they had begun fighting against these Ammonites and possibly against Rabbah itself. This is the continuation of that exact war. It's still going on as we finish out chapter 12. And Joab sent messengers to David and said, I have fought against Rabbah, and I have taken the city's water supply. Now, therefore, gather the rest of the people together and encamp against the city and take it, lest I take the city and it be called after my name. So, Joab is an interesting character because he's one of the most vicious people around David. He's kind of like a psychopath. But at the same time, he always looks to elevate David. He doesn't ever try to undercut David. He always tries to elevate David, even if he's incredibly vicious and horrible in doing it. And in this case, he's saying, look, I've taken the city. We have taken the city. All that needs to be done is the finishing touches. We've taken their water supply. We're starving them. Now we could just cut off their water and they're going to die of thirst. Now, therefore, you need to come, gather the rest of the people so you can take the city, or else I'm going to get credit for it. And you need to be the one to get credit because you're the king. So it's a very interesting dynamic that Joab has in being the general of David's armies. As vicious and ruthless as he is, and bloodthirsty as he tends to be, every chance he gets, he does look to elevate David. And in this case, he's telling David, look, I've done everything. Now come and destroy the city. Get the finishing touches so that you get the glory as you should as the king. Or else people are going to start calling it by my name as if I had done something instead of doing it for you. So David gathered all the people together and went to Rabbah, fought against it and took it. Then he took their king's crown from his head. Its weight was a talent of gold with precious stones, and it was set on David's head. Also, he brought out the spoil of the city in great abundance. So, all that was left was the finishing touches at this point. Everything had been completed by Joab and the army. All David needs to come through is that last push, get the credit. Now he's got the king's crown. The thought of because this crown is so heavy is that this might have been one of the giant kings, like Og, who this was his crown from way back during Moses' time. That's why it's so heavy and inlaid with jewels, is because it would sit comfortably on the head of a giant, very uncomfortably with its weight on the head of a man. But it's placed ceremonially on David's head as he's now the ruler of this place. It's now his. It's called by his name in so far as it's now his victory and under his control. So now he's bringing out the spoil in abundance. He has this mighty victory. And he brought out the people who were in it and put them to work with saws and iron picks and iron axes and made them cross over to the brickworks. So he did to all the cities of the people of Ammon, Then David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. So there's some dispute over the final verse here, that he brought out all the people who were in Rabbah and all the other people throughout all the cities he had done. But here, the New King James and very many other translations makes it out to be that he made them laborers, which we see Joshua doing, which we see throughout Scripture, is that they're put to the tribute. They're put to be workers. We see it with the Gibeonites. They came in to Joshua. They tricked them into believing they had come from far off and become allies of them. So in punishment, they didn't slay the Gibeonites, but they turned them into workers towards building things for the altar and the tabernacle and supplying them with the supplies that the priesthood would need. So here it's this idea that he now is making them workers and servants to do the labor and the hard labor that the nation would need. Now, in the King James, though, it makes it sound as though he slices them up with saws, as if he's slicing people in half, slaughters them with picks and with axes, and that he makes them go into the ovens, into the brickworks, into the kilns where they would make bricks, and he sets them on fire. Basically, he immolates the people. Now, the King James, as much as I love the KJV because of its poetry and just some of the words, some of the verses it has, there are some issues the King James has, and that is that it is being made off of very few Greek texts that we had from, I believe, around 900 AD was the earliest of them. But since, in the 400 years since the King James was written, started in, was finalized, was the 1611 King James, even though most of us have like a 1799 King James, whether we know it or not. It's more updated. They didn't have as many texts as 400 years later we now have, with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and many other texts that long predate those other Old Testaments that we had from the Septuagint. Septuagint alone predates, our earliest Septuagint manuscripts that we have now predate even the Dead Sea Scrolls and go 200 years before Christ was ever born. So a lot of the newer translations will translate it as the New King James has here, that he put them to work and didn't slaughter them. Some people who defend the King James as it being this great slaughter that David carried out, and is another sign of David's sin, which is odd to put at the end of a chapter that is based on David's repentance before God and reconciliation with God. To see him going back into sin sounds weird. It doesn't seem like it would fit, although not everything's prescriptive as it is descriptive. And this is just ending out this time period and bookending how this whole sin with David started and how it ended. But also some people will make the argument that we just don't want to think of King David as being this vicious to the people of Ammon. And, well, I mean, we just read of him slaughtering Uriah, basically, and leaving him to die. So, we've seen David do some things like this in the past, so we wouldn't put him past doing it. But it does seem that more than likely it's that he put them to work and not so much slaughtered them wholesale as it could be by the King James. Now, either way, it could be either one. It doesn't really change much in effect in that case. But moving on to chapter 13 now. After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister, whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Now, we're going to come to the prophecy, another part of the fulfillment of prophecy that Nathaniel had given to David. That adversity would come up from his own household. And this is seen in this account, where David's oldest son, Absalom, or Amnon might have been the oldest, and Absalom might have been the next oldest. But you have Absalom, who is one of his children, Tamar, his daughter, his lovely sister, Amnon, his oldest son from a different wife. And we see once again why polygamy is shown again and again. It's not just a rule we're given that we could ignore because it's just one verse in the law. But we are given example after damning example again and again of why polygamy is against God's created order and why it leads to nothing but dysfunction, despair, and destruction in the lives of his followers and his children. And we have yet another example of that here. You have Absalom. This is now years after the events that have occurred with Bathsheba. And Absalom, these children are now adults. Absalom has this lovely sister Tamar, beautiful to behold. But Amnon, David's oldest son, I believe, loves her a little too much. Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick, for she was a virgin. And it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. So the law forbade brothers and sisters from marrying. And he's so lustful for this young woman, who's only his half-sister. And she's a virgin. She's not married. So she's available, so to speak. But it's improper for him to do anything. So he's distressed. It's not like she's just like the town whore that he could hire off. No, she's beautiful to behold. He lusts after her. He desires her, but she's unattainable, which sounds a little familiar in a way. Because as I recall, that's kind of what had happened when David saw Bathsheba on the roof. Is he asked, "Hey, who's that woman?" And his servants just started waving red flags in front of his faces. "Hey, that's the granddaughter of one of your advisors, the daughter of one of your mighty men, and the wife of one of your other mighty men." Now you have the same thing with Amnon. "Hey, what about this? Oh man, this woman is so beautiful. That's your half-sister. She's a virgin." It's against the law of all things, of God. So no. You can't do anything improper with her. Can't do anything to her. It's improper. Everything goes against anything you could possibly want. But the lust, always after the lust. Because that lust is that visitor that comes to us. And we just want to be so hospitable to that sinfulness that's coming and knocking at our door. I mean, that sinfulness looks so good, and we want to be nice to it. I mean, we don't want to send that lust away empty-handed. We don't want to send that sin away empty-handed. We want to fulfill it. We want to nurture it. We want it to feel good and commune with it. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. So more than a friend, he has a cousin. Now, friend is an awkward term considering how horrible the advice he's going to give to him is. But this is his cousin, meaning also Tamar's cousin and Absalom's cousin. So it should tell you, David, man after God's own heart. Sinful, fallen, man after God's own heart. The sinfulness that he's entwined in his life has spread out. Those ripples of that impact have been felt. And it's going to continue to be felt. And it's going to continue to have this ripple effect through his family. Adversity through your own house. 2 sons and a daughter. Now a nephew. All embroiled in adversity being raised up in his own home. And he said to him, "Why are you, the king's son, becoming thinner day after day? Will you not tell me?" So he's saying, you're the king's son. You have everything you could ever want. You obviously don't want for food. You're the king's son. So what's the issue? Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. I love her. I lust after my brother Absalom's sister. Not after my sister, but after his sister. Because, we're only half siblings. So that somehow is different." So Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and prepare the food in my sight that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" Now, in our stranger danger, in our culture of understanding how creepy people can be, that throws up a lot of red flags. But in that kind of culture, it would be understandable. Please bring my sister to care for me. I mean, when my son's sick, I send his sister to care for him. After all, I don't want to get sick, let her get sick. But I send my daughter to care for him. She'll help him out when he's sick. She'll bring him tissues or water or make him tea. And it's the same kind of idea. Like, you're going to pretend to be ill, and when your father comes to check on you, you're just going to say, let my sister take care of me. I don't want the servants taking care of me. I want my sister. I want the closeness of family to take care of me. So when we see all of the story above, I lust after, I don't want to do anything, hearing this thinks like, well, how does no one see this? But it would come off as just a brother wanting his sister to take care of him. Possibly a big sister to take care of him. But he wants that kind of mothering sisterly love that she's going to give. Then Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let Tamar, my sister, come and make me a couple of cakes. Make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand. So make a couple of barley cakes. Make a couple of things I can eat. Help her bring me back to health. I want to see her make it, and I'll eat from her hand. It'll help me be well." And David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Now come to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. Then she took flour and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. So nothing abnormal, nothing raising red flags, just a sister to take care of a brother, helping him in his sickness. So she's making cakes, she's baking them. And she took the pan and placed them out before him, but he refused to eat. Then Amnon said, "Have everyone go out from me." And they all went out from him, because that's the power you have over servants when you're that wealthy. You can just tell everyone to leave, and they're required to turn their face away. That was just the nature of it. But here she is doing her sisterly duty, trying to take care of her ill brother. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them to Amnon her brother in the bedroom. Because she's in a different part of the house cooking. She's making them. Now he's saying, "Come on, bring them into me." She probably made them, and he's saying, "No, I refuse to eat. Let everyone go away because I want you to feed me." And now she's going to bring them in. And Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into Amnon, her brother, in the bedroom. Now when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come, lie with me, my sister." So now she sees the trap for what it is. Now she's grabbed a hold of. And now he makes his intentions known. That no, I was not sick. I was not ill. I wanted something much worse. I had much worse intentions. Much worse evil meant for this moment. But she answered him, no, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel, because it's against the law. Brother and sister are not supposed to do this thing. It is mentioned many times in Leviticus. We went through it ad nauseum. Almost literally ad nauseum, because it's disgusting to talk about. Do not do this disgraceful thing. And where could I take my shame? So don't do this disgraceful thing. It's disgraceful to the Lord, to his law, to his grace and mercy that he's poured upon us. Don't do this horrible, evil thing. And I'm a virgin. Where am I going to take my shame? If you take my virginity from me, I will have nothing. She will have no future. She could never get married. Because what they would do is when you would have those first relations and she would bleed for the first time when her hymen broke, her parents would keep that bed sheet as proof that she was not with another man before her marriage. And she's not just some poor woman who might be able to find a poor man and couple together. But this is a princess. What person at her level would be willing to marry her after she has been used in this way? That's what she's saying. No one would take her shame away from her. No one would ever take her as a bride. Her future is going to be taken from her by this act. Because the selfishness of some rich punk. Where's she going to go? No one will have her. She will have no future in the nation of Israel. And as for you, you would be like one of the fools in Israel. It's a fool who says in his heart that there is no God. So it would be a fool who would deny the authority and sovereignty of the law of God. You'd be cast off as an idiot. No one would see you as important. You would make a fool of yourself and destroy what good nature people have towards you and what reputation you have because of this act you're going to do before God. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold you from me, or me from you. So speak to Dad. He'll give me to you in marriage, and then everything will be right. I won't have my virginity taken from me. I'll be married. I'll have a place to take myself. I'll be able to raise children. You'll be able to have me the way you want me, and no one will think you a fool. Now, of course, this goes against the law. This goes against the law. This would not have been allowed. But many commentators have pointed out that this is probably her chance at one last desperate plea to get away from him, to buy herself time, as a chance to just say, look, this is my last hope. I don't want to do this, but this is my last chance to convince him to not do this to me. And that way, I'll have this out in the open. I can convince him that if he just speaks to Dad, Dad'll let us be married. We're only half siblings. Which is probably what he's thinking anyway. However, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. So he doesn't listen to her pleas, her calls for mercy. He ignores her and forces himself upon her anyway. because this is what sinfulness and the lust of the flesh does. It blinds us to those we hurt. It causes us to turn a blind eye and a blind ear to what we're doing in life and how we're hurting others. And although most of us will never hurt somebody to this extent, our sin still causes hurt. And when we hear people calling out to us to avoid these things, we need to avoid turning a blind eye and a blind ear to them. And then, of course, what happens next is what often happens when we do give in to the lust of our flesh. When we give in to the appeal that sin had on us. When we finally give in to what we did, we do exactly what David did. Exactly what Amnon did. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Arise, be gone." See, David didn't hate Bathsheba. But after he satiated his lust, he did send her home. He sent her away. He'd done what he needed to do. He satiated the sin that was in his heart. And he sent her packing until she was with child. Then it changed the plan a bit. If she had never conceived, that would have been the end of it, and they would have pretended it never happened. Amnon, though, his lust and the cries didn't live up to what he had imagined in his lusting for her and what he believed his first experience with her would be. He's forcing himself upon her. She's probably weeping and crying and begging him to stop. And this is causing him to hate her more. So that his hatred now is greater than any love he had. After all, he had already gotten his use. Now she's used. Now she's no longer that prize to be wished after. That forbidden fruit to be tasted. Now he's had a taste of it. And it's not sweet as he thought it would be. But it kind of rings bitter in his mouth. Because that's so often what sin is. It looks enticing. It looks sweet. And then we bite into it. We realize how bitter and nasty it is. So he goes and throws her out. "Arise, be gone." So she said to him, "No, indeed, the evil of sending me away is worse than the other evil that you did to me." Now you're sending me away as damaged. If you just would have had me and kept me, at least some not benefit, but at least I could still have a future. You could give me children. You could make me one of your wives. I could still have a life. But that's now gone. The evil of sending me away to live a life of essentially a widow, a childless widow, is worse than if you had done this to me and kept me as some forgotten wife, that I could have children. But once again, he would not listen to her. Then he called his servant who attended him and said, "Here, put this woman out, away from me, and bolt the door behind her." Put the woman out. Put this woman out. Please send my sister that I may eat from her hands. My sister, I love her so much. Please, I'd be well if I had my sister. But after he has his sister, now it's just that nasty, disgusting woman. Get her out. Now she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Then Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her robe of many colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head and went away crying bitterly. She went away in grief, tearing this robe that the king's virgin daughters would wear, so that everyone would know that about them. But now that's taken from her, stolen away. So now she rips it and puts ashes on her head to weep and grieve not just the violence done against her, but the future that was stolen from her. From the children she'll never have, to the husband she'll never dote over, to the house she'll never keep. Everything taken from her because of the lustful sin of a selfish man. Because our sin affects others in great and many destructive ways. It's one thing to be tempted, it's another to act upon the temptation. And Amnon acted upon a temptation that is incredibly wicked. And Absalom, her brother, said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? But now hold your peace, my sister, for he is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart." So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. Now it's weird because it sounds heartless. But Amnon's lusting after his sister must not have been something as secret as he thought it was. Because Absalom noticed. And when he saw this, and he had known that she had gone to be in his house and eat of and to feed him, Absalom knew something was wrong. And when he saw the robes ripped and the ashes on her head, he knows what happened. And in this moment, he understands that something's going to come of this. That justice will be served one way or another. So hold your peace. He's your brother. Don't go gossiping. Don't go bearing, really not a false witness, but real witness. But he's just saying, don't go throwing accusations around. Let's see how this plays out. So he takes her into his own house. She remains desolate. She remains childless, husbandless, acting as a childless widow for the rest of her days. And I'm sure Absalom took great care of her. He loved her very much. But it's not the same. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. Now King David hears about it. He's very angry. Doesn't say he took action, though. Now a lot of people have made the point that David's sin paralyzed him in this. That because he had acted in his lust with Bathsheba, that he didn't feel he had the moral certainty to act upon the sin of Amnon. And I don't know. It could be. It could be that the realization of David, knowing that he is a broken sinner, knowing that he couldn't possibly condemn his child in the way that he would like to because of the way he had been a sinner previously. But that does fall flat because we know as parents we need to take a stand against the mistakes our children make And that just because we made the same ones don't mean that we have no moral authority to tell them that they're also doing bad. Because oftentimes the mistakes we make as parents lead us with a unique and better understanding of how to deal with the sin of our children when they're going in the same path we did. I think this ends up being another understanding of David being passive when it comes to the actions of those around him. And that, in a way, he's allowing things to take their natural course. And that he is protecting one child, possibly Amnon, the firstborn. He sees him as the inheritor of the throne. And he's holding that child to a different standard. And this is where, when I say that we as human beings are just simply incapable of justice. Because we rule through emotion. And in this instance, David is not honoring a perfect, just action. He's placing his daughter well below his son. Regardless of what the reason is. Was it his sin that paralyzed him? Maybe. But regardless of what the reason is, there's no good excuse for the action or inaction that David took. And it allows the prophecy, that train of events that David had set in motion, to continue full bore. Because this is an actionable offense. David had to take action. And he didn't. And his inaction is going to continue to have painful ramifications to come. It's going to lead to a full-on coup and another civil war. That's how the ripples of David's sin has gone out. David being angry but being inactive. We cannot let the sins of our past paralyze the just actions of our future. David, better than anyone, should have understood the lust of the flesh and the damage it could do. But so often, we don't impart these lessons to our kids. So often we don't impart the mistakes we made onto our children and let them know exactly where we failed so they can understand how they need to walk and understand that where we made mistakes, they can ultimately sidestep the pitfalls we fell into. We need to be parents. We don't need to be perfect. Parenting is not about perfection. It's about leading through imperfection. I tell my son all the time, when he gets scared, being courageous is not about not being afraid. It's about overcoming your fear. and acting in spite of your fear. We have sinned as adults and as parents, sometimes in horrible ways. We have a laundry list of things that we have done wrong, and we have stumbled with, and we have fallen through, and things we can beat ourselves up about. Things where we will say that we have no right to speak to our children about the mistakes they're making because we made those same mistakes. So where do I have the right to speak about it? But my old pastor, Gary, I was at a pastor's conference with him because they were gracious enough to allow me to join their church's group at the pastor's conference. Ironically, at the church I now attend. But he was talking to someone else at the pastor's conference. And he was speaking to the person about whether or not they were married. And the young man was saying, we're not married, we're dating. We're almost as if, and I don't want to put words in the young man's mouth, but almost as if they're enjoying the life they have now and marriage is something for the future. And he was saying, no, that's not the way that works. You get married. If the relationship is worth it, you get married. If it's not worth it, you end it and you find somebody that's worth marrying. And I had said, I tend to keep my mouth shut in those things because I wasn't Christian. So me and my wife were together for 3 years before we got engaged. And then we were engaged for 7.5 years. So we were together for 10.5 years before we ever got married. So in that way, it's like what I said, I don't feel like I have the right to speak about these things because I did the same thing he sat talking about. My pastor said, no, because you did it, you know better. And because you did it, you have more of a responsibility to keep people from doing what you did. King David's sin was great. He gave in to that lust. He gave in to his passions. And because of that, he had more of a responsibility to explain that to his children. That this can never be for you. That you never should be falling into this because of the sin I've committed. I have a responsibility to push even harder because of what I've learned from my mistakes. And as parents, as I said, we have a responsibility to not pretend to lead from some act of perfection, but to lead through our imperfection. Because we're imperfect, and our children know it. They see it. And we don't get to act above it. But we need to counsel them through it so they don't end up making the same mistakes we do. Because that's the showing iniquity onto generations, to the third and fourth generation. That is that generational iniquity that we teach to our children that pull them from God and damage their walk with Him. When we want to set ourselves up for something that we simply can't live up to, instead of humbling ourselves and showing our children the proper way and showing them the pitfalls we also fell into, so that hopefully they can avoid them. Raise up your child in the way of the Lord, so that way they do not depart from it when they grow old. Part of that is teaching them the pitfalls of sin we fell into, and the traveler we welcomed and showed hospitality to. That sin that came to our door, and we just wanted to be hospitable and wanted to treat them good. And we fell and we stumbled. And we regret it. But do we regret it enough to instruct the next generation in how to avoid it? Hopefully we do. Because that's what we're called to do. To minister to those who come next, so that way they learn. And they learn well the lessons of our mistakes, so they don't repeat them, and they do better, and that their walk with Christ is more pure than our own was. Testimonials of drug use and violence and gang affiliation and all these things, they make for great stories, man. They make so interesting. But the greatest testimony a person could have is when your child can just stand up when they're older. Just say, I've known the Lord since I was a child, for as long as I can remember. I've walked out his ways. I've never strayed from him. And he's been good and faithful to me as I've tried to be good and faithful to him. And that's it. No drama. No tribulation of that kind brought on by self-inflicted damage of sin. But just that pure, honest testimony of someone who has just walked their entire life with the Lord. That's what we should try to give our children. And we can't do it if we feel paralyzed by our past. We need to accept it and allow our children to understand the damage it did and how best to avoid it in their own life. But that's where we shall end it for today. I hope this was fruitful for you. I hope to see you back again next time. But until then, be blessed.